Hello, welcome to day 11 of God's Great Hope 30 Days of Prayer. And we begin another section. There are three sections in this devotional study. The first 10 days is section 1, and then section 2 is days 11 through 20, and then 21 through 30. The biblical backdrop for this section is in Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 13. The prophet Isaiah seeks the Lord during a desperate time in Judah. As Isaiah becomes desperate before God in prayer, he experiences personal revival and a missional awakening, which eventually thrusts him out on a more extensive and difficult mission as God's prophet. So day 11, the scripture is Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1, just the first part of it, which says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw." And the title for today is Troubled Times Demand Desperate Prayer. King Uzziah's death brought about a great deal of political, social, economical, and spiritual unrest in Judah. Uzziah ruled Judah for 52 years and enjoyed great favor with God and man in his early years as king. Because of many years of relative peace, Uzziah was able to invest in building up the nation, as well as his own army and city defenses. He refortified Jerusalem and other cities, built a strategic seaport, raised up a massive army of over 300,000 well-armed and well-trained men, and invested in agricultural development around the nation, planting crops and digging wells in many arid regions. This time of prosperity and favor eventually waned as Uzziah became less interested in doing what was right in the eyes of the Lord. This is evidenced by the way Uzziah refused to remove the pagan idols and high places throughout the nation, as well as he refused to stand against social oppression and injustice, and to address the hypocritical and ritualistic practices of God's people in their worship. Uzziah also became prideful as he ignored the commands of God and defiled the temple by burning incense to God. Consequently, God struck him with leprosy, which resulted in Uzziah ruling from isolation through his son Jotham until his death some 10 years later. Sometime in the last 10 years of Uzziah's reign, Isaiah came on the scene and began denouncing the spiritual famine in Judah. That's found in Isaiah 1 through 5. In Isaiah 6:1, Isaiah bears witness to Uzziah's death and the end of his reign. Uzziah's death and God's judgment on his disobedience not only caused unrest among the people and nation, but also with the prophet. So much so that Isaiah evidently pulled aside to seek the Lord in prayer on behalf of himself and the people. This seeking of God is evidenced by the use of the term "I saw" in Isaiah 6:1. Saw is often used in the prophets to describe a time when genuine prophets of God turned aside to pray, seek the Lord, and gain a fresh vision and revelation during difficult times. Since Uzziah had become apathetic toward the spiritual famine in the land and defiled the temple, God's hand was now against the people and the nation. Because of this, there was great cause for great concern and need for God's messenger to draw near to the Lord in desperate prayer. Seasons of unrest and turmoil should produce a renewed desire among God's people, especially leaders, to seek God in desperate prayer. Isaiah knew that if ever there was a time when he and the nation needed to seek God in desperate prayer, it was in the year that King Uzziah died. Are believers and Christian leaders in America realizing the need to seek the Lord in desperate prayer today? What about you and your church? With unrest on every side in America, do you think we need to seek the Lord while he may be found, according to Isaiah 55:6? The prayer prompts for today as we leave are these. The first one is a prayer of just asking the Lord to bring his presence, that we may long for his presence and his perspective during these troubling days. And secondly, ask the Lord to give your church a desire to unite in desperate prayer. Have a blessed day.